Ayo lived in a quiet village surrounded by tall trees and colorful flowers. She was known as the best healer. Whenever someone was sick, they came to her. Her herbs and potions always worked like magic. People admired her, but no one knew her secret. Deep in the forest, there was a hidden grove. Ayo had made a pact with a spirit named Nuru who lived there. Nuru was not like other spirits. It didn't like to be seen or heard. Ayo had to visit it alone, leaving offerings of fruit and flowers. In return, Nuru gave her the knowledge of powerful healing herbs. But there was one rule: Ayo must never ask for something too big or selfish. One day, Ayo's best friend, Busy, fell terribly sick. Her body was hot like fire, and she couldn't eat or speak. Ayo tried all her remedies, but nothing worked. She grew desperate and decided to visit Nuru. When Ayo arrived at the grove, the air felt colder than usual. The trees whispered as if warning her. "Nuru," Ayo called softly. "Please, I need your help. My friend Busy is very sick. Nothing I do can help her." The spirit's voice was soft and echoing. "What do you ask of me, Ayo? Give me the power to heal Busy," Ayo pleaded. "I'll do anything." Nuru was silent for a moment. Then it spoke. "Anything, you say? This is a big request. If I grant it, I will need something in return. What do you want?" Ayo asked nervously. "You will know when the time comes," Nuru said. "But remember, once you agree, there is no going back." Ayo hesitated, but the thought of losing Busy was too painful. "I agree." The air grew colder, and a gust of wind swirled around Ayo. Suddenly, she felt a strange warmth in her hands. When she returned to the village and touched Busy, her fever disappeared instantly. Busy sat up, smiling weakly. The villagers cheered and called Ayo a miracle worker. But deep down, Ayo felt uneasy. She couldn't stop thinking about Nuru's words, "You will know when the time comes." Days turned into weeks, and everything seemed normal. Ayo continued to heal people, but she noticed something strange. Every time she used her new power, the forest near the grove seemed darker. The birds that once sang there were now silent. One evening, as Ayo was preparing herbs, she heard a soft knock at her door. When she opened it, there was no one there. But on the ground lay a small wooden carving of a hand, with the fingers curled into a fist. Ayo recognized it. It was a symbol of a promise. It meant the spirit was calling her. Ayo's heart raced. She grabbed her shawl and hurried into the forest. When she reached the grove, Nuru's voice greeted her. "Ayo," it said, "it is time for you to keep your promise." "What do you want from me?" Ayo asked, her voice shaking. "You must bring me the life of someone you love," Nuru said coldly. Ayo gasped. "No. I can't do that." "You made a pact," Nuru reminded her. "Without me, your healing powers are nothing. If you refuse, I will take back all the lives you have saved." Ayo's mind spun. She thought of Busy, the children she had cured, and the old woman whose pain she had eased. If she refused, all these people might suffer again. But how could she sacrifice someone she loved? Tears filled Ayo's eyes. Is there no other way? Nuru was silent, but the air around her grew heavy, as if even the trees pitied her. Ayo left the grove feeling broken. For days, she couldn't sleep or eat. She avoided Busy and her family, afraid Nuru might target them. She decided to seek advice from the oldest woman in the village, Mama Kemi. Mama Kemi was wise and knew many old stories. When Ayo explained her situation, the old woman frowned. "The spirits don't give gifts freely," she said. "But sometimes, they test your courage. You must outsmart it." "How?" Ayo asked. "You must find its true name," Mama Kemi whispered. Once you know it, the spirit loses its power over you. Ayo clung to these words and began her search. She spent days exploring the forest, talking to old trees and listening to the wind. Each step was filled with danger. Strange shadows followed her, and the grove seemed to watch her every move. As Ayo's journey unfolded, she discovered more about Niru's past, the sacrifices others had made, and the secrets hidden within the forest. With every clue, she grew closer to uncovering Niru's true name, but the spirit grew angrier, and the stakes became higher. When Ayo finally confronted Niru with its true name, the spirit roared with fury. You may have outsmarted me, but you will always carry the weight of your choices. In the end, Ayo kept her healing powers, but the forest was never the same. The grove remained silent, its once vibrant colors faded. Ayo continued her walk, but she never made another pact with the unseen. The lesson stayed with her, even the greatest gifts come with a price. The silence of the grove after Niru's defeat was a relief to Ayo, but it also felt like a warning. The forest no longer seemed alive, the vibrant greens of the trees had dulled, and the once cheerful birds were gone. The villagers didn't notice the change, but Ayo felt it in her bones. She returned to her hut, her mind heavy with what had happened. Days passed, and Ayo tried to focus on her work. She healed a child with a broken arm and helped an elder walk again. But each time she used her powers, a strange feeling crept into her chest, a mixture of guilt and unease. She couldn't shake the memory of Niru's parting words, "You will always carry the weight of your choices." One night, as Ayo lay in bed, she heard a soft rustling outside her window. She froze, her heart pounding. Slowly, she got up and peeked outside. At first, there was nothing but the dark outline of trees. Then she saw it, a faint glow moving through the forest. Ayo grabbed her shawl and followed the light. It led her to the edge of the grove but stopped just short of the trees. As she stepped closer, the glow flickered and dimmed, revealing something carved into the bark of an old tree. It was a single word, Amoni. The name sent a chill down Ayo's spine. She didn't recognize it, but it felt significant. Was it another spirit? Or was it a warning from Niru? The next morning, Ayo visited Mama Kemi again and told her about the glowing lights and the name. Mama Kemi's eyes widened. Amoni, she repeated. That's a name I haven't heard in years. It belongs to an old spirit, older than Niru. If Amoni has shown itself, it means the balance has been disturbed. What should I do? Ayo asked, her voice trembling. You must find out what Amoni wants, Mama Kemi said. But be careful. Spirits like Amoni don't appear without a reason. Ayo's heart sank. She thought her ordeal with Niru was over, but now it seemed like a new danger was emerging. She decided to return to the grove that evening, determined to face whatever was waiting for her. As the sun set, Ayo stepped into the forest. The air felt heavy, and the trees seemed to close in around her. When she reached the grove, she called out softly, Amoni, if you are here, show yourself. At first, there was only silence. Then a soft voice spoke, almost like a whisper. Why do you call my name, healer? Ayo turned, and there in the shadows stood a figure made of light and mist. It was neither male nor female, young nor old. Its form shifted constantly, like smoke caught in a breeze. I found your name carved into a tree, Ayo said, trying to keep her voice steady. What do you want from me? Amoni tilted its head, its glowing eyes fixed on her. You disrupted the balance when you outsmarted Niru, it said. Now the forest is dying, and it is your fault. Ayo's chest tightened. I didn't mean to harm the forest. I only wanted to save my friend. Every choice has consequences, Amoni said. If you wish to restore the balance, you must make another choice. What kind of choice? Ayo asked, though she was afraid of the answer. You must return the power Niru gave you, Amoni said. Only then would the forest heal. Ayo's heart sank. If she gave up her powers, she could no longer heal the villagers. What would they do without her? But if she kept the power, the forest, the source of life for her village, might wither and die. Tears filled Ayo's eyes. There must be another way. Amoni's form flickered, its voice softening. There is always another way, but it will not be easy. You must journey beyond the forest to find the tree of beginnings. Only its fruit can restore the balance without taking your power. Ayo nodded, determination replacing her fear. She would find the tree of beginnings, no matter how far she had to go. For the first time, she felt hope, not just for the forest, but for herself. As dawn broke, Ayo prepared for her journey. She didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but she knew one thing: she would fight to make things right. The next morning, Ayo packed a small bag with dried fruits, herbs, and water. She also carried her trusted staff, carved from the heartwood of a sacred tree, and a leather pouch filled with her healing powders. She didn't know how far she had to travel or what dangers awaited her, but she was determined to save the forest and her people. As Ayo stepped into the forest, she felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. The trees whispered as if they were watching her. The air smelled of earth and decay, a reminder of the forest's slow death. Hours turned into days as Ayo journeyed deeper into the unknown. The forest grew darker and stranger. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches clawing at the sky. Strange sounds echoed through the underbrush, rustling leaves, low growls, and whispers that sent chills down her spine. On the third night, as Ayo rested under a large baobab tree, she heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, coming closer with each passing moment. Gripping her staff tightly, she stood and called out, "Who's there?" A figure emerged from the shadows, a boy, no older than 10, with skin as dark as midnight and eyes that glowed faintly like embers. He wore a tattered cloak and carried a small drum slung over his shoulder. "Are you lost, Ila?" the boy asked, his voice soft yet piercing. "I am searching for the tree of beginnings," Ayo said, keeping her distance. "Who are you?" "I am Tunde," the boy said, smiling faintly. "The spirit sent me to guide you." Ayo narrowed her eyes. "Why would the spirits help me after everything I've done?" "The spirits do not hate you," Tunde replied. "They only wish for balance. But the path to the tree is dangerous. You will need me." Reluctantly, Ayo agreed to let Tunde accompany her. Despite his small frame, the boy moved through the forest with ease, as if the shadows themselves parted for him. He showed her secret paths and warned her of hidden traps. One afternoon, as they crossed a shallow river, Ayo noticed the water bubbling unnaturally. Suddenly, the river roared to life, and a massive serpent burst from its depths. Its scales shimmered like moonlight, and its eyes burned with fury. "Who dares disturb my waters?" the serpent hissed, coiling itself around a rock. Ayo froze, but Tunde stepped forward, holding his drum. "Great serpent of the river, we mean no harm. We are only passing through." The serpent's eyes narrowed. "I care not for your words. To cross my river, you must pay a price." Tunde turned to Ayo. "Do you have anything of great value?" Ayo hesitated, then reached into her pouch and pulled out a small vial of golden powder. It was her most precious remedy, made from rare herbs that could heal even the worst wounds. She offered it to the serpent. The serpent sniffed the vial, then snatched it with its tail. "Very well," it said. "You may pass, but beware, the path ahead is not kind to the weak." As they continued their journey, Ayo couldn't help but wonder if she would have enough strength to face what lay ahead. She had already lost something precious, and the road to the tree of beginnings was far from over. The next challenge came when they entered a dense part of the forest known as the Whispering Woods. The air was thick with mist, and the trees seemed to hum with an eerie song. Ayo and Tunde soon realized that the whispers weren't harmless, they were voices of lost spirits, trying to lure them deeper into the woods. Ayo, one voice whispered, soft and familiar. Come this way. It was Busy's voice. Ayo froze, her heart racing. Busy. No. Tunde shouted, grabbing her arm. It's a trick. Keep moving. But the voice grew louder, more desperate. Ayo, please help me. I'm lost. Ayo struggled to resist, tears streaming down her face. She knew it wasn't real, but the sound of Busy's voice broke her heart. Tunde tightened his grip, pulling her forward. The spirits prey on your guilt. Don't listen. With Tunde's help, Ayo managed to escape the whispering woods, but the experience left her shaken. She realized that the spirits were testing her, forcing her to confront her deepest fears and regrets. Finally, after weeks of travel, they reached a clearing bathed in golden light. At the center stood the Tree of Beginnings, a towering, ancient tree with roots that seemed to stretch into the earth's core. Its branches sparkled with fruit that glowed like tiny suns. Ayo approached the tree, her heart pounding. She reached for one of the fruits, but a booming voice stopped her. Who dares touch the sacred fruit? The tree spirit emerged, a figure made of bark and light, its eyes glowing with wisdom. I am Ayo, a healer, she said, bowing respectfully. I seek your fruit to restore balance to the forest and save my village. The spirit studied her for a long moment. The fruit is not given freely. To take it, you must leave something behind. Ayo hesitated. She had already sacrificed so much, her vow, her peace of mind, her safety. What more could she give? Finally, she spoke. Take my voice. Let me heal without words. The spirit nodded. A fair trade. As Ayo plucked the fruit, she felt a strange warmth fill her chest. Her voice faded, but she felt a new power in her hands, a power that didn't rely on words. When she returned to the village, the forest slowly began to heal. The trees grew vibrant, the birds returned, and the grove came back to life. Though Ayo could no longer speak, her actions spoke louder than words. The villagers understood her sacrifice and honored her as the healer who had saved them all. In the end, Ayo learned that true healing comes not from power, but from the choices we make and the courage we find within ourselves. Though Ayo's voice was gone, her presence became even more powerful. The villagers, once reliant on her spoken words for guidance, learned to understand her through her gestures, expressions, and the gentle strength in her touch. They began to communicate with her in new ways, by watching, listening with their hearts, and trusting her silent wisdom. But peace in the village did not last long. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, strange figures appeared at the edge of the forest. They wore dark cloaks and carried torches, their faces hidden by masks. The villagers gathered in fear, whispering among themselves. Tunde, who had stayed by Ayo's side since their journey, stood at the front of the crowd. Who are you, and what do you want? He called out. One of the figures stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp. We are the seekers, protectors of the sacred balance. We have come for the one who took from the Tree of Beginnings. Gasps rippled through the villagers, and all eyes turned to Ayo. She stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. She raised her hand, signaling to Tunde that she would handle this herself. The seeker pointed at her. You disturb the natural order by taking the fruit. The balance may be restored, but your actions cannot go unpunished. Ayo shook her head and motioned to the forest, as if to say, the forest is alive again. Isn't that what matters? The seeker's voice grew harsher. The forest may thrive, but the cost of your defiance lingers. You took power from the sacred tree. That power will draw darkness unless it is returned to its rightful place. Tunde stepped in front of Ayo, his small frame filled with determination. She gave up her voice for the good of the village. She has already paid a heavy price. The seeker ignored him, focusing on Ayo. You must come with us. Only then will the balance be complete. Ayo's heart sank. She had thought her journey was over, but now it seemed her sacrifice had only begun. She turned to the villagers, her eyes pleading. She didn't want them to suffer for her choices. Mama Kemi stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. If you take her, who will heal us? Who will protect us when the forest faces another threat? The seeker hesitated, the torchlight flickering across his mask. She is not the only one with gifts. The fruit she consumed left a spark within your land. If another is willing to learn, the power can be passed on. A murmur rose from the crowd. Who among them could take on such a responsibility? The villagers looked at each other, uncertain and afraid. Then Tunde spoke. I will learn. Teach me, and leave her in peace. Ayo's eyes widened in shock. She shook her head, trying to dissuade him, but Tunde stood firm. You saved me, Ayo. You saved all of us. Now it's my turn to protect you. The seekers exchanged glances, then nodded. Very well. The boy will train under our guidance. But understand this, his path will not be easy. Ayo knelt before Tunde, tears streaming down her face. She placed her hands on his shoulders, silently begging him to reconsider. But Tunde smiled, his confidence unwavering. You showed me how to be brave, Ayo. I'll be fine. The seekers led Tunde into the forest, their torches fading into the distance. The village was quiet, the weight of his departure heavy in the air. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to normal. Ayo continued her healing work, though her heart ached with worry for Tunde. She often walked to the edge of the forest, hoping for a sign that he was safe. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Ayo heard the faint sound of a drum. Her heart leapt, and she ran to the grove. There, standing tall and proud, was Tunde. His eyes glowed faintly, just like the spirits he had once feared, and his drum was slung over his shoulder. I'm back, Ayo, he said, his voice steady and strong. And I'm ready to protect this village, just like you always have. Ayo embraced him, her tears flowing freely. The village had a new protector now, one who carried the strength of the forest and the lessons of the past. Together, they faced the future, knowing that as long as they stood united, no challenge was too great. The balance was restored, but the bond between them and their people was stronger than ever, a reminder that true power lies in love, sacrifice, and the courage to protect what matters most. As the days turned into months, the village thrived under the watchful care of Ayo and Tunde. The forest, once on the brink of death, now pulsed with life. The birds sang sweeter songs, the trees stood taller, and the river sparkled like a ribbon of light. The villagers worked together, planting new crops, repairing old homes, and sharing stories around the fire. Tunde's return brought hope, but it also brought mystery. The glow in his eyes hinted at the knowledge he had gained during his time with the Seekers. He spoke little of his training, only saying, "The forest teaches in whispers, not shouts." Despite his cryptic words, Tunde began to show extraordinary abilities. He could sense when storms were coming, even on clear days. He guided lost travelers to safety without hesitation. When a child fell ill, Tunde walked alongside Ayo, using his drum to lure the fever away. Together, their healing was unstoppable, and the villagers called them the guardians of the grove. One fateful night, however, the peace was shattered. The wind carried a chilling howl that swept through the village, extinguishing fires and rattling the huts. Ayo and Tunde were the first to emerge, sensing the disturbance. Standing at the edge of the forest was a shadowy figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing red like embers. "It has begun," Tunde murmured, his voice tight with dread. Ayo tilted her head, her silent question clear. The seekers warn me, Tunde explained. When the balance is restored, it awakens those who thrive in chaos. This is the Shadow Weaver. The Shadow Weaver stepped forward, its voice slithering like a snake. So, the little boy thinks he can play protector. And the silent healer, what can you do against me? Ayo didn't flinch. She stood firm, her staff in hand, while Tunde beat his drum, the sound reverberating through the air. The villagers gathered behind them, their faces pale but determined. You will not harm this village, Tunde declared. The Shadow Weaver laughed, a sound that made the trees shiver. You think you've won? The forest is alive, yes, but its power is mine to corrupt. The balance you fought so hard to restore will crumble. Without warning, the Shadow Weaver unleashed a wave of darkness that spread across the ground like ink. The villagers screamed as it threatened to engulf their homes. Ayo raised her staff, its carved symbols glowing faintly. She slammed it into the ground, and a barrier of light erupted, halting the darkness. Tunde joined her, his drum beats growing louder and faster. The sound seemed to push the darkness back, creating ripples in the Shadow Weaver's power. The battle was fierce, Ayo's silent determination and Tunde's rhythmic strength against the Shadow Weaver's malevolent force. The villagers, inspired by the bravery of their protectors, began to help. They lit torches, sang songs of courage, and held their ground. The collective strength of the village became a force of its own, weaving into the light that Ayo and Tunde commanded. The Shadow Weaver hissed, its form flickering. You cannot stop me. Darkness always finds a way. Tunde's voice rang out, steady and clear. But so does light. With one final strike of her staff, Ayo channeled the forest energy. The ground beneath the Shadow Weaver split open, roots wrapping around it like chains. Tunde's drumbeat echoed like thunder, sealing the darkness into the earth. The night fell silent. The villagers stared in awe as the forest seemed to breathe again, the glow of fireflies returning to the trees. The Shadow Weaver was gone, its threat buried deep. Tunde sank to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. Ayo knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. The villagers erupted into cheers, celebrating their victory. But Ayo and Tunde knew the fight was far from over. The forest, alive and thriving, was still vulnerable to those who sought to harm it. Together, they vowed to remain vigilant, to protect the balance and their people. In the days that followed, the villagers planted new trees and rebuilt stronger homes. Ayo continued her silent healing, her presence a source of comfort. Tunde's drumbeat became the heartbeat of the village, a reminder of their unity. The forest stood as a testament to their courage, its leaves whispering stories of sacrifice and hope. And though shadows might rise again, the guardians of the grove were ready, their bond unbreakable, their love for their people shining brighter than the darkest night. As seasons passed, the village basked in newfound harmony, its rhythm guided by the steady partnership of Ayo and Tunde. The story of their courage became the heart of fireside tales, passed from elders to children as a reminder of the strength that lay in unity. But deep within the earth, where the roots of the forest coiled around the remnants of the Shadow Weaver, something stirred. One moonless night, Tunde awoke with a start. His drum, always resting beside him, thudded softly on the ground, as if responding to an unseen force. He looked toward the forest, its edges cloaked in a heavy mist that shouldn't have been there. Tunde grabbed his drum and hurried to Ayo's hut. Ayo, already awake, was standing at her window, her staff glowing faintly. She turned to Tunde, her eyes filled with concern. Without words, they knew the forest was calling. They stepped outside, the village eerily quiet. Mama Kemi and a few others emerged, worry etched on their faces. "What is it this time?" she asked, clutching her shawl tightly. Tunde frowned. "I don't know yet, but it feels wrong." Ayo gestured toward the forest, her movements sharp and urgent. "Danger. We must act quickly." With the villagers watching from their doorsteps, Ayo and Tunde entered the forest. The air grew colder with each step, and the once vibrant trees appeared lifeless, their branches drooping as though weighed down by an invisible burden. Then they saw it, a massive tree in the heart of the forest, its bark cracked and oozing a dark, tar-like substance. This was the tree of beginnings, the source of the forest magic. Something was poisoning it. Tunde placed a hand on the ground, closing his eyes to feel the pulse of the earth. "It's the shadow weaver," he whispered. "Its essence is seeping out. The balance is breaking again." Ayo nodded and tapped her staff, signaling they needed to act fast. But before they could approach the tree, the ground beneath them rumbled. Out of the shadows emerged creatures formed from the same dark essence, twisted figures with glowing red eyes and jagged forms. Tunde leapt to his feet, beating his drum to summon a protective rhythm. The creatures hesitated, their shapes flickering, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they surged forward, their movements chaotic and relentless. Ayo swung her staff, its light cutting through the darkness like a blade. The creatures dissolved when struck, but for everyone they defeated, more appeared. The odds were overwhelming. "We need help," Tunde called out, his voice straining with effort. Ayo paused, her mind racing. She thought of the villagers, of the unity that had saved them before. She motioned to Tunde to keep the creatures at bay and sprinted back toward the village. Bursting into the square, Ayo raised her staff high, its light illuminating the area. The villagers gathered, their fear quickly replaced by determination. Mama Kemi stepped forward. "What do you need from us?" Ayo pointed to the forest and then to the villagers' tools, drums, and torches. They understood. The fight wasn't just Ayo and Tunde's, it was theirs too. Armed with whatever they could carry, the villagers followed Ayo back into the forest. When they arrived, Tunde was surrounded, his drumbeat slowing as exhaustion took hold. The villagers rushed to his aid, their combined efforts creating a wall of light and sound. The creatures faltered, their forms breaking apart under the onslaught of unity. Tunde, renewed by their presence, struck his drum harder, the rhythm shaking the ground. Ayo led the group toward the tree of beginnings. She placed her hands on its bark, channeling all her energy into it. The villagers joined her, singing and drumming, their collective hope and strength flowing into the tree. Slowly, the darkness receded. The cracks in the tree began to heal, its bark glowing with a soft, golden light. The creatures dissolved entirely, their essence returning to the earth as harmless shadows. When the forest finally stilled, the villagers collapsed in relief. The tree of beginnings stood tall once more, its branches stretching toward the sky as if in gratitude. Tunde approached Ayo, his drum slung over his shoulder. "We did it," he said, a weary smile on his face. Ayo nodded, her eyes shining with pride. She gestured to the villagers, who had proven that courage wasn't limited to a few but lived in everyone. As they walked back to the village, the stars shone brighter than ever, their light a promise that no darkness could ever truly extinguish the bond of love, hope, and unity. Life in the village returned to a calm yet vibrant rhythm after the victory over the Shadow Weaver's lingering essence. Ayo and Tunde became symbols of hope, but they were not seen as untouchable heroes. They were family, part of a community that had proven its strength through unity. Months passed, and the forest thrived once more. The tree of beginnings stood as a beacon, its golden light visible even from the farthest edges of the village. Yet Ayo and Tunde knew better than to relax entirely. They sensed the balance was fragile, a delicate thread that could unravel if not guarded carefully. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ayo stood at the edge of the forest, her staff planted firmly in the ground. She closed her eyes and let the whispers of the trees fill her mind. They spoke of peace but also of a distant unease, something beyond the forest, something stirring in the world beyond the village. Tunde joined her, his drum slung across his back. Do you hear it? He asked softly. Ayo nodded. She gestured toward the horizon, where the mountains loomed. The whispers are not from here. Ton frowned. Then the balance we fought for might be at risk somewhere else. That night, they gathered the elders, including Mama Kemi. Around the central fire, they discussed the whispers of the forest and what they might mean. Leaving the village is not a decision to take lightly, Mama Kemi said. But if the forest calls, you must answer. The villagers, though reluctant to let their protectors leave, agreed. They prepared supplies for Ayo and Tunde, giving blessings and words of encouragement. The next morning, Ayo and Tunde set out, their journey taking them beyond the familiar trees and into lands neither had seen before. The forest accompanied them for a while, its edge seeming reluctant to let them go. But as the trees thinned and the terrain changed, they found themselves in open grasslands, where the air felt different, lighter but charged with an unfamiliar energy. Their first challenge came in the form of a barren field where the soil was cracked and lifeless. Tunde knelt, pressing his hand to the ground. Something drained this place, he murmured. It's as if the land spirit has been taken. Ayo pointed toward a distant hill where a lone figure stood. The figure wore a tattered cloak and held a crooked staff, its shape gnarled like an old tree. They exchanged a glance and approached cautiously. The figure turned to reveal a face weathered by time, its eyes hollow yet filled with a strange, haunting light. You've come, the figure said, their voice a mix of sorrow and urgency. Who are you? Tunde asked, gripping his drum tightly. I am a keeper of the land, the figure replied. Or I was, before it was stolen. Stolen? Ayo's silent question came through her sharp gaze. The keeper gestured to the barren field. A force beyond this realm siphons the spirit of the land, twisting it into something unnatural. If left unchecked, it will spread. Ayo and Tunde exchanged a determined look. This was why they had been called beyond their home. The keeper extended a hand, offering a small crystal that glowed faintly. This will guide you. But beware, the further you go, the stronger the darkness becomes. With the crystal in hand, they pressed onward, their journey filled with encounters that tested their courage and unity. They faced spirits twisted by despair, landscapes where the air itself seemed heavy with sorrow, and challenges that pushed their abilities to their limits. Through it all, Ayo's healing light and Tunde's rhythmic strength proved unshakable. They learned to rely on each other even more deeply, their bond growing stronger with every step. Their journey taught them that the fight for balance wasn't just about protecting a forest or a village, it was about protecting the essence of life itself. The lessons they carried from their home became their guiding stars, reminding them that no matter how vast the darkness, unity and love could always light the way. And so, Ayo and Tunde continued their path, knowing the world was vast and full of stories yet to be told, battles yet to be fought, and lives yet to be touched by the light of their unbreakable spirit. As Ayo and Tunde ventured deeper into unknown lands, the challenges grew more daunting. The crystal, a faint beacon of hope, pulsed faintly in their hands, leading them to places where the land spirit had been most corrupted. It seemed as though every step forward brought them closer to something far more sinister than they had ever encountered. One day, the crystal's glow intensified, pulling them toward a dense, misty valley. The trees here were skeletal, their branches reaching out like the twisted arms of ghosts. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the faint sound of whispers, voices that seemed to rise from the very ground. Tunde gripped his drum tightly, glancing at Ayo. It feels like the forest back home when the shadow weaver was near, he said, his voice low. Ayo nodded, her expression resolute. She tapped her staff on the ground, signaling that they needed to move forward. The whispers grew louder as they descended into the valley, forming words that sent shivers down their spines. Turn back. You cannot save what is already lost. But they pressed on, undeterred. As they reached the heart of the valley, they found a massive pit in the ground, from which a dark, swirling mist rose. At the edge of the pit stood a figure cloaked in shadows, their presence radiating an oppressive power. "Welcome, travelers," the figure said, their voice echoing unnaturally. "You've come far, but this is where your journey ends." The figure raised a hand, and from the mist emerged creatures unlike any Ayo and Tunde had faced before. These were not twisted shadows but beings of solid darkness, their forms shifting and reshaping with every step. Tunde began to beat his drum, the sound reverberating through the valley. The creatures hesitated, their movements faltering, but they didn't retreat. Ayo raised her staff, its light cutting through the mist, illuminating the area around them. Together, they faced the oncoming horde. The battle was fierce, more intense than anything they had experienced. For every creature they defeated, another took its place. The figure in the shadows watched silently, their presence an unrelenting weight. Ayo and Tunde's movements grew slower as exhaustion set in. Just when it seemed the creatures might overwhelm them, a sudden burst of light erupted from the crystal. It floated from Ayo's hand and hovered in the air, radiating a warm, golden glow. The creatures recoiled, hissing and retreating into the mist. The figure in the shadows raised their hand, but the light from the crystal grew brighter, forcing them to step back. "This isn't over," the figure said, their voice dripping with malice. They dissolved into the mist, leaving the valley eerily silent once more. The crystal returned to Ayo, its glow softening. Though victorious, Ayo and Tunde knew the fight was far from over. The figure's words echoed in their minds, a chilling reminder that the darkness was still spreading. As they left the valley, the crystal's glow continued to guide them, its light a symbol of the hope they carried. Their journey was far from over, but they were determined to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that as long as they stood together, no darkness could overcome their light. And so, with hearts full of courage and spirits unyielding, Ayo and Tunde pressed on, ready to confront the mysteries and dangers that awaited them in the vast, untamed lands beyond. Ayo and Tunde emerged from the valley, their limbs heavy with exhaustion but their resolve unbroken. The crystal's glow steadied, leading them into a new terrain, rolling plains filled with vibrant grasses that whispered in the wind. Though the land seemed alive, there was an undercurrent of unease, a strange energy that kept their senses sharp. As they walked, Tunde glanced at Ayo. The shadowy figure, they were different. Stronger, smarter. "They knew we were coming." Ayo nodded, her staff clicking softly against the ground. "The enemy is learning," her gaze seemed to say. Their victories were no longer simple, they were skirmishes in a much larger war. They camped at night under a sky so full of stars it felt alive. Tunde played a soft rhythm on his drum, the sound carrying across the plains. It wasn't just music, it was a call for clarity, for guidance. As the beat resonated, Ayo closed her eyes, letting the rhythm wash over her. The crystal suddenly flared, its light pulsing in time with Tunde's drumming. A voice whispered through the air, carried by the magic of the sound. "Follow the thread of stars. The weaver awaits." Tunde stopped, his hands hovering above the drum. "Did you hear that?" Ayo nodded, her heart racing. The voice was familiar, like an old story she couldn't quite recall. They both looked to the horizon, where the faint outline of a mountain range could be seen in the distance. The crystal's light pointed the way. The journey to the mountains was grueling. The plains gave way to rocky terrain, and the air grew colder with each step. Ayo and Tunde relied on each other more than ever, sharing food, stories, and the occasional nervous laugh to keep their spirits high. As they neared the mountains, they came upon a small village nestled at its base. The people there seemed weary, their eyes shadowed by fear. An elder approached, leaning heavily on a carved cane. "You've come to face the weaver, haven't you?" the elder asked, her voice trembling with both hope and dread. "We follow the light," Tunde said, pointing to the crystal. "What can you tell us?" The elder shook her head. The weaver has spun a web of despair over these lands. Many have tried to stop it, but none have returned. Be cautious, young ones. The weaver's power lies not just in strength but in the ability to twist your thoughts, to make you doubt yourself. Ayo tightened her grip on her staff, her jaw set with determination. Doubt was a powerful foe, but she and Tunde had faced fear before and emerged stronger. The villagers offered them supplies and guidance, but the atmosphere was heavy with sorrow. As Ayo and Tunde left the village and began their ascent into the mountains, they carried the weight of those who had tried and failed before them. The higher they climbed, the more oppressive the air became. The crystal's glow flickered, as if struggling against an unseen force. Shadows danced along the rocky walls, their movements unnatural and unsettling. Finally, they reached a vast cave entrance. The air inside was cold and damp, and a faint sound echoed from within, a rhythmic clicking, like the spinning of a loom. Tunde's drum tightened across his back as he and Ayo exchanged a glance. This was it. They stepped into the darkness, the crystal lighting their way. The cave walls shimmered with threads of light and shadow, weaving intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift. At the center of the chamber stood the weaver, a towering figure cloaked in a robe of woven shadows, its hands working tirelessly at a massive loom. "You've come far," the weaver said, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "But every thread you pull only strengthens my web." Ayo raised her staff, its light blazing, while Tunde began to beat a steady rhythm on his drum. The weaver laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "Let us see how strong your light truly is." The battle began, the air filled with the clash of light and shadow. The weaver's threads lashed out like whips, but Ayo's staff deflected them, her movements precise and unwavering. Tunde's drumming filled the chamber, disrupting the rhythm of the weaver's loom. But the weaver was cunning. It wove illusions that made Ayo and Tunde question their actions. Ayo saw the forest of her home burning, while Tunde heard the cries of his family, begging him to stop. For a moment, doubt crept in, threatening to unravel their strength. But then Ayo's voice rang out, clear and strong. "Tunde, the light is within us." Her words cut through the illusions, and Tunde's drumming grew louder, more powerful. The crystal flared, its light piercing the weaver's web. Threads snapped, and the chamber trembled. The weaver shrieked, its form unraveling as the crystal's light consumed it. The loom shattered, and the cave filled with a brilliant glow. When the light faded, the weaver was gone, and the oppressive weight lifted. The crystal returned to Ayo's hand, its glow soft but steady. The chamber was silent, but it felt alive, as if the land itself was breathing once more. Ayo and Tunde emerged from the cave victorious, their bond stronger than ever. They knew their journey was far from over, but they had proven that even the darkest threats could not withstand the light of unity and hope. Together, they would continue to protect the balance, one step at a time. As Ayo and Tunde descended the mountain, the sky above them seemed clearer, the clouds parting to reveal a sun that shone brighter than ever before. Yet, as they traveled, a quiet unease lingered in their hearts. The battle with the weaver had been only one part of a much larger conflict, and they both felt that this victory had not been the end, but rather a signal that something more dangerous lay ahead. Their journey back to the village at the base of the mountain was quiet. The villagers greeted them with a mixture of awe and relief, but their faces soon turned somber when they spoke of what they feared most. The weaver had been powerful, but there were whispers that another force, even darker than the first, had begun to stir in the world. "The shadow is not just in one place," the elder had warned. "It spreads. It seeks the hearts of those who have already lost." Ayo and Tunde shared a glance, the weight of their mission heavier than ever. They could feel the tension in the air, an invisible threat, much like a storm on the horizon. It was clear that the peace they had fought for was fragile, and the battle they had just won was only a brief lull before the next wave of darkness. They traveled through more villages, and everywhere they went, the stories were the same: people were disappearing. Not in the traditional sense, but in a way that left the villagers unnerved. It was as if the very essence of these people was being stripped away, leaving behind empty shells of their former selves. One evening, as they sat by a campfire near the edge of a dense jungle, Tunde played a slow, mournful beat on his drum. Ayo looked into the fire, her thoughts heavy. The forest around them felt alive in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. It whispered in the wind, and the trees swayed as if they were listening to something far beyond their understanding. Suddenly, the crystal paused in Ayo's hand, its light flickering. She raised it, as if trying to understand the source of the disturbance. A voice echoed from the depths of the jungle, faint but clear: "Come closer, or lose everything." The air turned cold, and a thick fog began to roll in from the forest, enveloping them. It wasn't the same mist they had encountered before. It was alive, shifting, and it carried with it a sense of deep sorrow and despair. The whispers came again, this time louder and more urgent. "Tunde, stay close," Ayo said, her voice steady but with an edge of fear. As the mist thickened, the sounds around them grew distorted. The cries of distant animals were twisted into something almost human, as if the forest itself was mourning. Ayo clutched the crystal, its glow the only thing that pierced the suffocating darkness around them. "Who are you?" Tunde called out into the fog, his voice strong but filled with uncertainty. From the mist, a figure emerged, a woman draped in tattered robes, her face hidden beneath a hood. Her presence was chilling, her eyes glowing faintly as she stepped closer to them. "I am the one who has watched," she said, her voice soft, yet carrying an immense weight of power. "I am the one who sees the threads of life and death. And now, I see you." Ayo and Tunde instinctively stepped back, their hands ready. The crystal flared brighter, and the light cut through the mist, revealing more of the woman's form. Her skin was pale, and her hair seemed to float as if caught in an eternal wind. But her eyes, those eyes, were filled with centuries of pain and regret. "You," Ayo began, but her words faltered. She felt the weight of the woman's gaze, as if it was peeling away her very soul. "I see you," the woman repeated. The weaver was but a thread. "But she smiled, a slow, cruel twist of her lips. "I am the loom itself." The realization hit Ayo like a thunderclap. The woman before them was not just another force of darkness. She was the origin, the very creator of the webs that had been haunting the lands. The weaver had been one of her creations, but this woman was something far more dangerous, something that existed beyond the reach of their understanding. The woman's laughter echoed in the air, sending shivers down their spines. "You think the crystal will save you? You think your unity can defeat me? I am not bound by your simple magic. I will take everything you have, your hope, your courage, your light, and I will weave them into my darkness." Ayo raised her staff, the light from the crystal shining like a beacon of defiance. "We will stop you," she said, her voice firm. "You cannot stop what you cannot see," the woman replied. "I have already begun to weave your fate. The threads are already in motion. You are too late." The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the mist surged forward, engulfing them in an impenetrable fog. The world around them seemed to shift, as if they were no longer standing on solid ground. It felt like they were falling, spiraling into a darkness that had no end. But even in that terrifying moment, Ayo and Tunde did not falter. Together, they stood firm, the light of the crystal glowing stronger than ever. The woman's voice grew distant as the fog receded, and for a moment, Ayo thought they might have won. But then the voice came again, a whisper that cut through the air like a knife: "You cannot outrun fate, children. The loom is already set in motion." Ayo and Tunde knew they were not yet free. The journey was far from over, and the true enemy had just shown her face. But one thing was certain: they would not back down. The threads of fate might be twisted, but together, they would fight to the very end to unravel the darkness and restore balance to the world. And so, with renewed determination, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. The fog lifted, but the chill it left in their bones lingered. Ayo and Tunde stood in the stillness, hearts racing but determined. They both knew that the woman, the one who called herself the Loom, was not done. She was a force beyond their comprehension, and her words had shaken them more than they had let on. "Stay sharp," Ayo whispered to Tunde, gripping her staff tightly. Tunde nodded, his drum now strapped firmly to his back, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of the crystal in Ayo's hand, pulsing softly, as if it too was preparing for what was to come. They had faced many dangers together, but this was something else entirely. This was a war not just of strength or magic, but of will. As they continued through the dense jungle, the air grew heavier, thick with tension. The landscape seemed to warp and twist around them, as if the earth itself was alive and watching them closely. It wasn't just the land that had changed, the animals were different too. The birds no longer sang, and the insects had grown unnaturally still. Every sound was muted, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. "Something's wrong," Tunde murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Ayo stopped in her tracks, her eyes scanning their surroundings. The feeling of being watched pressed down on her, making her skin crawl. She could feel it in the air, the suffocating weight of it. They weren't alone. Before they could react, a figure stepped from the shadows, blocking their path. It was a man, tall, with sharp features and glowing eyes that shimmered like molten gold. His clothes were made of rough, dark fabric, stitched with intricate patterns, and his presence felt as if the very earth had drawn him forth. "I am Kofi," the man said, his voice low and melodic, yet carrying a strange, unsettling undertone. "And I have been sent to guide you." Ayo raised an eyebrow, stepping forward cautiously. "Guide us? Or lead us to another trap?" Kofi smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I come with a warning. The Loom is watching you. It has spun its threads around your fates. The next step you take could be your last." Tunde's drum vibrated at his side, almost as if it was responding to the strange man's words. Ayo's grip on her staff tightened. "If you know so much, why not tell us what we need to do?" Kofi's smile faltered, and he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you can outsmart the Loom? You cannot. It knows your every move. It has seen your victories, your weaknesses, your fears." He paused, his eyes searching Ayo and Tunde's faces. "The Loom can take the light you carry and turn it against you. It is already inside you." Ayo and Tunde exchanged uneasy glances. The man's words were unsettling, but there was something about him, something they couldn't place, that made them hesitate. They had heard similar warnings before, but none quite so chilling. "You want us to fear it, don't you?" Tunde said, his voice steady. "We won't fall to that." Kofi's expression softened, but it only made his presence more unnerving. "Fear is not the problem," he said softly. "It is your doubt. The Loom feeds on doubt. It makes you question yourself. It will show you illusions, tricks, things that make you believe you are not worthy. That you are not strong enough to carry the crystal." Ayo took a deep breath, the weight of Kofi's words pressing against her chest. "Then we will fight the Loom with everything we have." Kofi stepped back, his golden eyes flickering in the fading light. "Very well. But beware. The Loom weaves its threads into the heart of those closest to you. It will turn them against you, make them doubt you. Even the ones you trust the most." With that, he turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ayo and Tunde alone in the silence that followed. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. "We need to keep moving," Ayo said after a long pause, her voice tinged with urgency. "If what he says is true, We cannot afford to lose our focus. Ton nodded, but his mind was troubled. Who could the loom twist against them? They had no family here, no one but each other. But the words Kofi spoke felt like a truth they couldn't escape. As they made their way deeper into the jungle, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The sun disappeared behind thick clouds, and the air became thick with a heavy fog once more. It was like the jungle itself had come alive, closing in on them, suffocating them. Suddenly, they heard a voice, soft at first, then growing louder. Ayo. Ton's eyes widened, his drum beginning to vibrate again as if it was trying to warn him. Ayo, the voice repeated, now unmistakably clear. Ayo's heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded like her mother's. She had not heard it in so long, not since she had left her village. She stopped in her tracks. The fog seemed to swirl around her, thickening, pulling her in. Mother, she whispered, the word slipping from her lips before she could stop it. Ayo, come back, the voice coaxed again, this time laced with sorrow. It was so familiar, so loving, that Ayo felt her resolve begin to waver. Could it really be her mother? Ton grabbed her arm, pulling her back with a jolt. Ayo, no. It's not real. But the voice continued, a soft, desperate plea. You've been gone too long. Come home. Ayo's eyes filled with tears, and she struggled against Ton's grip. Could this be the loom's trick? But it felt so real. She could almost see her mother's face, feel her arms around her. Ayo, don't listen, Ton said firmly. The loom is trying to confuse you. It will take you if you let it. Ayo blinked, her mind clouded by the illusion. For a moment, she wanted to believe it was her mother, to go back to everything she knew. But then she remembered the battle they had just fought, the weaver, the loom, and the darkness they were fighting. Taking a deep breath, Ayo shook her head. You're right, she said, her voice shaky but strong. I won't be fooled. The voice vanished in an instant, and the jungle grew deathly still. But something had shifted inside Ayo. The illusion had been so real, so close to her heart, that it had shaken her in a way she hadn't expected. She looked at Ton, who was still gripping her arm, his eyes full of concern. The loom is getting stronger, Ayo said quietly. It's using our memories, our deepest fears, against us. Ton nodded. And it will keep trying. But we are not alone. As long as we have each other, we can fight it. The air around them seemed to settle, but Ayo knew that their next challenge was going to be even harder. The loom's web was tightening, and they were at the center of it. Together, they pressed on, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy, but that their bond was stronger than any illusion the loom could create. The fight was far from over, and they would face it head-on, whatever it took. Ayo and Ton pressed on through the jungle, the weight of Kofi's warnings echoing in their minds. The deeper they ventured, the more it felt like they were walking into the very heart of the loom's web. The trees seemed to grow taller, their branches twisting like gnawed fingers, reaching out to grab them. The air was thick with tension, every step carrying the heavy weight of their purpose. But no matter how dark the jungle became, Ayo could feel the crystal in her hand, steady and warm, a beacon in the suffocating darkness. It was a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. She held onto it tightly, determined to push forward. Soon, the jungle cleared, and they came upon a clearing. At the center stood a large, ancient stone structure, crumbling with age but still majestic in its own right. A faint glow seemed to emanate from within it, and Ayo knew they had reached the heart of the loom. This is it, Ayo whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Ton nodded, his drum pulsing against his back. We have to destroy the loom before it destroys us. They stepped into the stone structure, the air inside cool and thick with ancient energy. As they walked further, the glow grew brighter, revealing an enormous loom in the center of the room. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, huge, with threads of silver and gold stretching across the space. At the heart of it, a dark figure sat, its face hidden in shadow. Ayo and Tunde froze in their tracks as the figure slowly rose, its movements graceful and eerie. The air crackled with power, and Ayo could feel the presence of the loom wrapping around her, tightening its grip. "You've come far," the figure said, its voice like a whisper on the wind. "But you are too late. The threads have already been woven." Ayo stepped forward, holding the crystal up in front of her. "We won't let you win. We'll stop you." The figure's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound filled with darkness. "You think you can defeat me? I am the loom, and you are nothing but threads in my design." Suddenly, the loom's threads seemed to come alive, twisting and swirling around them. The walls of the chamber shifted, and Ayo's vision blurred. She saw faces, strange faces, familiar faces, each one twisted in fear and doubt. Her mother's face appeared again, calling her, pleading for her to come back. "Ayo," the voice whispered, sweet and coaxing. "Come home." Ayo's heart pounded in her chest, but she shook her head, clenching her fist around the crystal. She could feel Tunde's presence beside her, steady and unyielding. "No," Ayo said firmly. "I am not afraid. I will not be swayed." With a deep breath, she stepped forward, the crystal glowing brighter in her hand. The loom's threads writhed in the air, attempting to snare her, but she focused all her energy into the crystal. It pulsed with light, a brilliant, pure light that cut through the darkness like a sword. The loom screeched in pain, its thread snapping and unraveling in the wake of the light. The dark figure howled in fury, but Ayo didn't stop. She had come too far. They had both come too far to turn back now. Tunde lifted his drum, and with a loud beat, the ground beneath them trembled. The air hummed with the rhythm of the earth itself, the sound amplifying the light of the crystal. Together, their power, Ayo's light and Tunde's rhythm, began to unravel the loom's hold on the world. The dark figure faltered, its form flickering and shifting like smoke. You cannot destroy me," it hissed. But Ayo, her heart steady and her purpose clear, took one final step forward and thrust the crystal into the heart of the loom. A blinding flash of light erupted, and the chamber shook violently. When the light faded, the loom was gone. The chamber was silent. The air felt lighter, less oppressive. Ayo looked around, her heart racing as the weight of what they had just accomplished settled over her. The dark figure was gone, and the loom's threads had been severed. Tunde lowered his drum, breathing heavily but smiling. "We did it," he said, his voice full of relief. Ayo looked down at the crystal in her hand. It was no longer glowing, its power spent. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, as if the world had shifted back into balance. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the jungle around them seemed calm. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the birds began to sing once more. Ayo and Tunde stepped out of the stone structure and into the sunlight, the weight of their journey finally lifting. But the battle had changed them. They were no longer the same people who had walked into the jungle weeks ago. The loom had tested them, shown them their deepest fears, and forced them to confront their darkest doubts. And they had emerged stronger because of it. As they made their way back to the village, Ayo glanced at Tunde. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice filled with both hope and uncertainty. Tunde smiled, his eyes filled with the same resolve they had shared from the very beginning. "Now," he said, "we live. We rebuild. We make sure the loom never rises again." And with that, they walked side by side, knowing that while their journey had come to an end, the future was full of endless possibilities. Together, they had saved the world, and together, they would face whatever came next.